Hey friends, and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan and thank you so much for joining. Today we are going to be making egg pasta. This is something that is super great to make in the summertime when you have a ton of eggs. You can definitely dry out your pasta and keep it for the entire year. My chickens actually just stopped laying, but I do have a good amount of eggs that I want to use up. So I'm just gonna make a single batch that we can eat for dinner tonight. But I thought I might as well bring you along with me and kind of show you the process that I use for making homemade pasta. So with that, let's get started. First thing we're gonna need is just a food processor, makes our life a little bit easier, and then just a white flour. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to just spoon a little bit of flour into this. I'm gonna need in total 2 1/4 cups of flour, and then we will add salt, we'll mix that, and then we will put some eggs in. So the proper way to measure flour is to actually spoon it in. That's why I have this giant bucket. And then you wanna overflow it a little bit, as you can see here. And what I do is I take a knife and this flat edge, I just scrape it off. So that way it's not compact and it is an actual cup of flour. It's funny because I learned this from my grandma when I was super young. She was always teaching me how to cook, and so every time I pull out my knife to measure my flour, I think of my sweet grandma. So there's 2 cups, and then we will get a 4th in, measure it the same way. And then I'm just gonna add about a teaspoon of salt into the flour mixture. Maybe a little bit less than a teaspoon. Or I pour too quick and we'll do a full teaspoon. So then all I'm gonna do is just put the lid on. My food processor I broke the lid, so I have to be kind of strategic. So I'll show you. I broke this snap off here, and so I have to push that down with a knife. So just, be better than me. But now I'm just going to pulse that. Just a couple times, just trying to get the flour and the salt mixed up. Take that lid off. The next thing I'm going to do is move this flour out of the way. And I just keep my flour in a food grade storage bucket. I find that a lot easier, and I just keep it in my pantry. That way I'm not always refilling the flour holder. First thing I'm going to do is just mix 3 egg yolks. In total, we're gonna need 3 egg yolks and 2 full eggs. So I find it easier to go for the egg yolks first. That way, if I mess up and the whole egg falls in, it's not that big of a deal because I need that anyways. So I'm just putting the whites in one container, yolks in the other. These are fresh eggs from our chickens, and so I find that the white and the yolk are very attached. So when at all possible, I actually just use my hand if I don't have a good crack on the shell, because I find that I have a lot better control over the yolk and the egg if I am able to just hold it. So in there I have 2 yolks. We need 1 more. See, again, another bad crack. No problem. We will just put it in my hand. Use that to separate them. And I just kind of crack my fingers a little bit and it goes through. And I'm gonna wash my hands. We're going to dump these egg yolks into the bowl. And then crack 2 more eggs. Because these are eggs from our chickens, I like to crack them in a separate dish just to make sure everything looks okay before I mix it into the full dish. in there, so I'm just gonna scoop the rest of it out. Perfect. I will save these whites for a future project. Perfect. And then, so we got 3 egg yolks, our 2 full eggs, and then I'm just going to do about a tablespoon of olive oil. That looks good. And then we're just going to combine these. You don't need to really combine them, you just want to make sure that the yolks are broken, really. Cool. That looks good there. And then what I'm going to do is just drizzle this over the flour mixture. And then we're going to pulse to combine. Okay, so how you know it's done when it's in the food processor is you basically want to run it until it creates a ball, and then the ball will break apart. Let it create one more ball, and then you are in a pretty good place. So what I'm going to do is I just have this surface here, and I'm just going to take it all out. I guess I should flour my surface first. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour down. And I like to make sure that my flour cup is relatively full so that once my hands are dirty, I don't have to get in it. And then you are just going to take out the blade, be very careful, put that in a safe spot. And then we're gonna combine our dough. And we're just going to knead it for a while. What we're looking for is a smooth consistency. As you can see right now, it's not lumpy, but it's not smooth. So we're just going to work the dough for a while until it can get a little bit smoother. This will probably take, I don't know, 10 or so minutes, so I will catch back up with you once my dough is looking a bit smoother. Okay, so we now have a ball of pasta dough. As you can see, it's really smooth. And it's just looking nice. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to put this off to the side, just wrap it up in some saran. We're gonna let it rest for 30 minutes to an hour just to let everything relax. And then we will start rolling it into our pasta. So while I was waiting for that first dough to set, I decided to just make one more, just because I had the perfect amount of eggs and I wanted to kind of give you a little troubleshooting. So as you can see here, this is making kind of a powder. And obviously if I like push it together, it'll stay, but this is not the consistency that we are looking for. We want that kind of dough that we got the first time. So if this happens, all you're going to do is just add a little bit of water, pulse it a few times, see how it's coming along, and then just keep adding water as you go. So while the pasta is kind of relaxing, I'm going to make stroganoff or something like stroganoff. I have a lot of elk, I have pasta, I have a little bit of wine that I want to use up. So I'm going to make something similar to stroganoff, and I figured I might as well take you for that journey as well. So first thing I'm going to do is just caramelize some onions. And I would probably traditionally use, hold on, I'm grabbing my veggie scrap bag. I would traditionally probably use a yellow onion for this, but I am a huge fan of using what you have and not going to the store because you don't have the absolute perfect ingredient for whatever you're making. So I highly recommend you just using what you have in the house, what you need to use up, and I bet you it will turn out awesome. So, while I would rather have yellow onions for this, I have a lot of red onions from our garden this last season that I'm going to use, and these onions have lasted phenomenally. They just kind of, once they're growing, they just flop over in the field. I let them sit out for, I don't know, a week or so, just letting the greens die back. And it is now February 10th. I've had them in kind of a chilly location and I have not had any issues with, I have not had one onion go bad. So that's huge. And I'm just cutting these into really thin slices. I'm gonna caramelize them, which is gonna take quite a while. So that's why I'm getting started on the onions before I actually get started on the meat. All of my big knives are dirty, so I can't cut these super thin, so I'm just gonna put them in the veggie scrap bowl bag. What I do here is I just collect all of my veggie scraps. So I've got a dog roaming around here, if you can hear him. I just collect all of my veggie scraps, and then when we're making a soup or broth or anything like that, I just boil these with some water, and it adds really nice flavor to add to our soup. All right, so now that I have these, you can see they're very thin. Now that I have these, I am going to get them browning in the pan. So traditionally for something like this, I would use my Dutch oven. That is currently brining a elk roast right now. I am making pastrami. If you want to see that, I'll have that video up soon as well. But all you're going to do is just turn your stove top onto medium heat. Cut a few pieces of butter. This is Kerrygold butter. I used to be very skeptical of high quality butter. I would just get like the Kroger brand. Then my grandma started ranting and raving about this butter and how it made everything better. And I actually think it does. So I highly recommend you going a little above and beyond and using the really good butter. We're just gonna let that melt. And then I'm just going to run the butter along the bottom of the pan. Now that it's kind of bubbling, we're going to add in the onions. Gonna give them a nice stir. And then I'm just gonna let these cook. Okay. All right, these mushrooms are going to go into the pan with the caramelized onions. And we're just gonna let those cook down until all of the moisture has evaporated from the onions. In the meantime, we are now going to get cutting some garlic. So how I do peel my garlic is I just find the kind of the stem area, I cut that off. And then, oh, my knife is gonna be big enough today. You just hit it, take your knife, make sure you're being very careful and just slap the garlic. And then, whoop, I got a little crazy on that one. It just makes the peel fall right off. And that's it. And then I just use this fancy garlic press because I hate cutting garlic, so once the mushrooms are about done cooking, I will press the garlic in. Okay, next I'm just gonna press in the garlic. So again, you just take a full clove, stick it in the press, and push down. And then I just scrape it off with a knife. You might have some like weird little pieces that don't get pressed. I sometimes put them back through. If they press, great. And then if I can't get them to, I'll just move on. Mix that in. Turn the heat off while we do this. Perfect. So that's super simple. Mix that in, let it cook for just like 1 minute. And then I made about a third of a cup or so of flour. And I'm just going to sprinkle that in. Give it a stir. The reason we're doing this is we want the flour to stick to our vegetables. That way when we mix in our liquids, it doesn't just become a like lumpy mess of, you know, when you get just like those huge lumps of flour that you can't incorporate in. This is how we're going to avoid that. Cool. That looks good. Now I'm gonna take this wine that I wanted to finish off. I'm not gonna measure it. And give this another quick stir. Turn the heat back on. And then just stir that in. If you don't like cooking with wine, that is absolutely no problem. Just skip that step. I do think if you don't mind cooking with wine, it adds really, really nice flavor. Cool. And then what we are going to do is grab our beef broth. And a whisk, and just whisk it in. The reason we're whisking it is, again, we've got that flour in here, so I want to make sure that I'm not making it chunky, like getting flour lumps or anything like that. So we're just going to whisk it in slowly to make sure that the flour fully incorporates in. If you dump it all in at once, you risk, wow, I'm making such a mess. If you dump it all in at once, you risk having a chunky stroganoff. And then once you get it well incorporated, then you can dump quick. Okay, so I am just going to let this now cook down. It should start thickening up a little bit because we've got that flour in here. And then I'm just going to add about 1/4 of a cup of Worcestershire sauce. Or so. Okay, next thing I did is I just took some of the steaks we have. This is just kind of a round steak from our elk. Chop that up into fine little cubes. Biggest tip I can give you for chopping your meat consistent sizes is to do it while it's still slightly frozen. That makes cutting so much easier. Then I'm just gonna sprinkle, I don't know, 2 tablespoons or so of Worcestershire sauce over. Again, I'm gonna use this. This is literally just salt, onion powder, garlic powder, pepper. So I just like to use it because it's like an all-in-one. Sprinkle some of that over the meat. Add a little bit more salt. Give that a nice stir. Say hello to Arrow over here, who of course comes out once the meat comes out. And then we're gonna go ahead and get this cooking up on the stove. So the meat itself, I mean, elk is phenomenal. It doesn't really need a lot. So all I'm going to do is just take that mixture and cook it up on the stove. I will say, wild game, especially elk and antelope and those types of things, are super lean. So you do want to use a little bit more oil than traditionally. And this is just some avocado oil. Okay, oil's warm enough. I'm just gonna add in all of the meat. And then give it a nice stir. And we're just gonna let that cook. This is super high quality meat, but I do find with wild game, you wanna cook it kinda high and quick. So that's what we'll do. Okay, so our sauce is simmering over there, our meat is cooking back there, so I'm gonna get started on the pasta. This has sat for about an hour, and as you can see, it's just like relaxed a lot. So what you're gonna do is cut it into fourths. Dough that I'm not using, and you can see like just what relaxing it did. Just looks very kind of smooth, and the glutens have relaxed. And then I'm just gonna take my rolling pin and just roll it out just a little bit. Then we're gonna turn this on low. I have this on the smallest setting, which is the largest number. We're gonna run it through. Take that, fold it in half, run it through again. Okay, so you can see here how it's kind of making this like weird texture. That's telling me that the dough needs to rest a little bit longer. So I'm just going to kind of knead the fourths back together, and we're gonna let this rest just a little bit longer. actually working a lot better. I just kind of looked up why that was turning out so weird, and it said maybe I needed to dust the pasta a little bit more. So I've been trying that with some flour, and it's turning out much better. And it did just turn out. My dough was totally fine. It didn't need to sit any longer. It just needed to be floured. So simple fix if you have that same issue, just flour your dough. What a concept, right? Okay, so now that I have this piece of dough that's fully rolled out, I'm going to turn this off. And you can do this at the very end if you want. I'm gonna do it now to show you. Stick this attachment. I'm using the big attachment that you can see in there. We're gonna get more like fettuccine or linguine or I don't know, whatever that is. Stick that on, turn it back on to low, roll your dough, and then feed it through the same way. Here you can see we have beautiful pasta. And then I just take it, make a little nest, and we will move on to the next. And then I'll just throw these little pieces in the water later. Doesn't really bother me. Here's what our pasta is looking like. All you're gonna do to cook fresh pasta like this is just boil some water, throw the pasta in. It will literally only take about 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes I like to cut them a little bit because some of them get really long. I'll cut them as I'm putting them in the water, but just boil it and keep tasting your pasta. And when it's to the point you like it, pull it out and it's ready to go.
Give it a try. It's really good.
Is it actually?
It is. It's actually really good. You didn't even botch it. That was fantastic.
What would you do different?
Nothing.
Shorter noodles?
Shorter noodles. That's really good.
Thanks.
Nothing I would change.
All right, friends, I just got the kitchen all cleaned up. I'm gonna go relax for the night. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.